Hello everyone, my name is Chandler Folds, and today I'll be sharing with y'all my presentation. V.S. Naipaul was born in 1932 on a Caribbean island called Trinidad to a family of Hindu Indian descent. His grandfather was an immigrant from India and worked on the sugar plantations in Trinidad as an indentured servant. Naipaul's father was an educated man and was an English language journalist who worked for the Trinidad Guardian. Throughout his childhood, V.S. Naipaul was inspired by his father's writing. His father also read to him often, which gave him the ambition to write. Naipaul grew up in a large family consisting of more than 50 cousins. In 1948, Naipaul won a scholarship which later gave him the opportunity to attend Oxford University. 2 years later, he began college at Oxford University and attended the college for 4 years. In 1954, he left college to start a job as an editor at the BBC in London. Naipaul knew that he did not want to go back to Trinidad to live, so he settled in London. Wholeness was important to Naipaul, which he felt represented people and their cultures. He wanted to settle in a place where he could feel whole, and England gave him that feeling. Naipaul went through a tough period of time while in England. He suffered from depression, poverty, and loneliness. In 1955, Naipaul wrote his short story called Miguel Street. This story was the launch of his writing career. That same year, Naipaul married Patricia Hale, who he met while attending Oxford University. Throughout his marriage to Patricia Hall, he had several affairs. In 1972, he met Margaret Gooding, with whom he had a long-time affair with. In 1955, his wife Patricia died of cancer, and just 2 months later, he married Nadira Alvi, a Pakistani journalist. In December 2001, Naipaul won the Nobel Prize for Literature. This was the first time in over 20 years that a British writer had won. V.S. Naipaul died on August 11, 2018, at the age of 85 in London, England. Naipaul wrote a total of 19 books, which consisted of both fiction and non-fiction material. His books were written about slavery, guerrillas, corrupt politicians, revolution, and the power. His initial books were written about the West Indian culture and his life experiences in the Caribbean. One of Naipaul's greatest novels to achieve worldwide success, A House for Mr. Biswas, was published in 1961. It was one of several novels he wrote based on life in the Caribbean. This ironic and satirical story was based on what Naipaul saw and felt as a child growing up in Trinidad. It's about a man named Mr. Biswas who was mean and unsympathetic and had many enemies, including his own relatives. Mr. Biswas marries a woman named Shema, and they move into her family's home. Mr. Biswas is unhappy in his marriage and is consumed with being independent and owning his own home. One segment of the novel, he had lived in many houses, and how easy it was to think of those houses without him. Mr. Biswas is concerned about having a home of his own to live in. He is forced to depend on others and feels that he is not in charge of his or his family's lives. Mr. Biswas constantly moves his family from one house to another. Throughout the story, he continuously struggles to find his fortune and constantly makes bad decisions. Mr. Biswas finally settles down and finds his dream home for himself and his family. The house is not perfect, but it is his. In the end, the stress that has accumulated causes Mr. Biswas to have a heart attack and die. Critics say that this story reflects how Naipaul's father struggled to make a life for his own family. This novel, as well as several other novels written by Naipaul, explores the main characters alienation in a new country, the displacement they felt, and how they struggled to fit in and find their identity. During Naipaul's writing career, he has written about his own travels to different countries. His first travel book was written about his first time traveling to India. In the book, An Area of Darkness, he describes his visit to an ancestral village. It was in a poor and dusty part of Uttar Pradesh. His childhood dreams of what it would have been like living in India was very disheartening. In his book, he criticizes India and even belittles his own people living there and called it a country of inefficiency. He described them as unimportant and uncreative. He was very critical of the beggars and even the doctors and lawyers and said they had unsanitary habits. Naipaul's critical and harsh comments about other cultures caused him acquire many enemies. Naipaul often tried to make sense of the world around him through his writing. His words and sense of humor was sometimes cruel and often came out as an insult. Naipaul hoped to find his identity and where he felt he belonged through words.